And welcome back to another episode of Psychic Evolution. I'm Jamie Clark.
And I'm Maggie Clark, and this is a podcast where you discover your psychic and mediumship gifts to develop this in your personal psychic energy and experiences. So today we are so honored to welcome a brand new guest onto our show, and his name is William R. Schroeder. He's a DO MCDB. Dr. Bill is a physician, board certified internal medicine, also a molecular biologist, and more importantly, an energy medicine practitioner. He is a graduate of the University of Arizona School of Medicine's associate program in Integrative Medicine under Dr. Andrew Weil, and also a student of Dr. Rosalyn Bruyere. Now, if you don't know who Rosalyn Bruyere is, she is an amazing energy practitioner. She wrote a book called The Wheels of Light, which has been fundamental in my own journey of studying energy medicine. So we'll put a link in the show notes for her in that book because it's absolutely fabulous. But in 2002, Dr. Bill was the subject of an experiment along with 47 other people at the Human Bioenergetics Laboratory, located at the University of Arizona School of Medicine's Tucson campus with Dr. Gary Schwartz. Now, Gary Schwartz is obviously the researcher of paranormal energy that Jamie Clark works with as an evidential medium for the scientific studies on the soul phone technology coming out. So we are one day going to be able to talk with our loved ones on the other side through technology that's being built right now. And the studies are going really, really well. So when we had an opportunity to interview Dr. Bill, we jumped on it because he is so in line with our message and with energy healing. So during this episode, we are going to hear how Dr. Bill, a medical physician, went from molecular biologist to an energy healer. Now, Dr. Bill is also going to take us through a guided exercise to access different states of consciousness and awareness to enhance our psychic abilities, and also for healing pain and anxiety. We will also put a link in the show notes for a recording of an extended exercise that Dr. Bill so graciously provided for a Psychic Evolution monthly training session this March of 2023. This is an actual scientific experiment that we're doing on the podcast today. So once you listen to this episode, we have a link in the show notes for a survey that you can fill out to help Dr. Bill with his ongoing research. And you can also remain anonymous if you prefer, but most importantly, this may help to prove one can experience this healing phenomenon even after the time that it has been recorded. And as we all know, time is an illusion. We have a brilliant doctor ready to help scientifically help the advancement of energy healing. So I encourage you to fill out that survey, and thank you in advance. He has a very practical Western background, but here he is, having this beautiful expression of energy medicine. So how did you transform, Dr. Bill, from a normal, practical, material physician in Western medicine to and a molecular biologist of all things, to an energy healer? What was the transformational process? What happened to get you to switch into energy medicine?
Well, I think everybody will find this story somewhat interesting, and maybe they've had a similar experience. Mine was colored by my extensive training since a very young age in materialist, reductionist, concrete, scientific, statistical evaluation of reality. That's what I was. A molecular biologist is a true scientist, and a physician is someone who uses scientific principles to design treatments for illness. And I was very good at that, to the point it was kind of crazy in a way. And in a way, I was involved in a cult that was very useful, the cult of science and medicine, which is different in the West. We have our own cult out here.
Yeah, it's like,
it's very different in the East. Physicians, medicinal practitioners don't carry the baggage of this reductionist, materialist viewpoint. Well, I did. And I was involved in an experiment that you mentioned with Dr. Schwartz. He designed this at the Human Bioenergetics Laboratory, and I was very much that way when I walked onto that research project. And they tested us to see if we could quote, run energy, which is something that I'll explain to you. It turns out that we run energy daily. We're pulling in energy from the environment and emitting it without our knowledge on a level that involves subtle energies. And he was testing this to see if he could improve our ability to detect and emit this energy in a statistical scientific way. So he measured a lot of our ability to do so at a baseline level. Then we all went down to a beautiful little ranch called Rex Ranch, 60 miles south of Tucson. And Rosalyn Bruyere, who was mentioned in this, taught our group how to do a specific technique over a day and a half, which tells you how quickly anyone can learn this. We had skeptics of all varieties in that group, and everybody learned how to do this. It's not hard at all. I teach my patients in approximately that same amount of time, the same technique on a very regular basis. I've taught over thousands of people how to do this. Anyway, the experience was more than I bargained for. Meeting Rosalyn is kind of encountering a person who lives in a world that I had no access to at all and thought was myth and fantasy. And she shook that out of me. By the end of the weekend, not only was I able to run energy, but I was all of a sudden a reluctant psychic. And no one kind of gave me the info as to whether this was going to happen or not. Turns out I was really good at running energy, and there's an explanation for, to me at least, why this occurred. So that transformed me in a weekend, and the same process happens untold numbers of times to individuals throughout time in our planet. Thousands of years of human experience has demonstrated that this is part of our consciousness experiment that we each experience as human beings. We come here and we enter the physical, and we are also metaphysical beings. We have no choice but to be metaphysical beings because we are conscious. Metaphysics is a consciousness item. And so I went into this thinking, okay, this will be very interesting. I'll have an experience. And next thing you know, I was capable of knowing when people were going to be at a personal location for them, whether they were going to show up at meetings. On some cases, I knew where they were, what they were doing, and what they were saying. This went on for a period of approximately 2 months and slowly faded. And I had no idea. I had really not had any experience with psychic experiences, except when I was a very young man. Yeah, I was brought up in the Christian religion, and I connected very strongly with Jesus Christ, and had some very similar experiences. But next thing you know, I go to a stupid school, science school. And I know that sounds strange, but it really did numb me to these experiences. And that's what happens to a lot of scientists. They cease to observe, and they form an opinion, like I did, of what the nature of the universe is. Well, that's not science. You make an observation, you see if it's reproducible, you form a theory, and then you test that theory against reality. What I found out when I went to science school was that they weren't even teaching the scientific method anymore. So one of the things that happens with scientists and physicians is that they enter into that, what I call a cult. It's a disturbing event, because that's not what science is all about. So all of a sudden, I'm a psychic. I go back 2 days later to my clinic, and I have a patient with a severe pain syndrome after having knee surgery, and it was killing him. He was going to die. His diabetes was worsening, his hypertension was worsening, his coronary artery disease was worsening. And I looked at him, and he was in severe pain, totally disabled. And in 2 minutes, I relieved that pain by running energy into his knee, and the effect was permanent. And I went, oh my Lord, I have a technique that no one even mentioned in medical school at all. They didn't even, say, well, this doesn't exist, so don't pay any attention to it. They didn't even mention it.
Don't acknowledge
it. Wasn't reported as a phenomenon. There's acupuncture, there's Tai Chi, there's Qigong, there's all these thousands ancient techniques that are extremely effective, and nobody said anything. So I was taken aback and started working as an energy medicine practitioner that day. And I had a backlog of patients. So it was easy for me to find reproducible experiments. About 2 years after that, I had an experience that I think is even more important to relate to on this podcast, because I think it directly gives you some insight into the development of psychic skills. I was working with a woman using a technique where I would run energy into her central nervous system, who had fibromyalgia, severe anxiety, totally disabled, horrible, disastrous situation. I was running energy into her central nervous system, and I got upset because I knew her life was going to fall apart in front of me. And I got the opportunity a lot of physicians get to have, which is to watch someone slowly die. I was not into this anymore. And I said, okay, I'm going to run as much energy as humanly possible into this person and see if that worked, because we hadn't had success before. I did this, and all of a sudden I went into a state that is a little bit hard to describe unless you've experienced it. All of a sudden I went into a state where I was in complete bliss and peace, kind of hard to describe. I felt warm and fuzzy all over, and I was levitating. My body didn't levitate, but for all intents and purposes, I had to check out what was happening with me. A wave of energy came across my body, like a wave on the ocean. And I didn't know what was happening. All of a sudden, the patient said, I have no pain or anxiety, and I'm floating off the table. And I looked at her, and she wasn't floating off the table, but that was her interpretation of what was happening. And I had to treat her a couple times more for that effect to remain, because it turns out that when you enter that state that she and I entered that day, you have the tendency to go back into another state that is a little bit more disturbing, and that's where pain and anxiety live. And that's what I call the ordinary mind. I have to have a reference point, so I use words, and the words are inadequate, but that's where the brain and the five senses are. And so when you aren't in that state, you do not have to suffer from the emotional content or the physical pain of having a body. You are not perceiving it. Therefore, it, in a sense, does not exist. So I didn't know what to do. It was a full 6 months before I could get back to Rosalyn and, get some explanation from an expert as to what the heck was going on in my life and in the lives of my patients. And I finally made it back there. And Rosalyn is an interesting person. She teaches all over the world. And I was in a room with 80 people, and she was about to begin a session of teaching. And I had maybe 2 to 5 minutes to get an explanation from her, because everybody wants to talk to Rosalyn. Everybody has an experience. All of a sudden, they want Rosalyn to know about it, and they want to know what she thinks. So I was in that queue, and I finally got to Rosalyn, and I said, Rosalyn, what's going on? And she goes, oh, that's no big deal. That's just the biggest aura wins effect. And I said, what? You didn't even mention this before. She said, I'd mentioned this plenty of times. You just weren't paying attention. And apparently, this is something that's known to energy practitioners at some level. And no one had, again, I discovered it on my own. And for months I said, oh, cool, I discovered this really cool thing. That it turns out that a lot of people knew about it. But I did discover something even more interesting as I continued to practice that. It turns out that we alternate between this state and the ordinary consciousness state so quickly that we're unaware of it. So when I started to get people into deep states of consciousness, trying to help them heal their physical diseases, I started to feel the energy field going back and forth across my field at rates that I could finally distinguish because they were slow enough. And I went, hey, wait a second, this person was already there. They were spending, what amounted to a microsecond or something like that in this deep state, and then going exactly I think it may be at the same time. It may be instantaneous. It's so quick, you can't hardly tell. back to the ordinary mind state. So in a technical, energetic field way, we're continuously psychic and we just don't know it. And when I finally connected with that, I said, "Oh, no wonder I was psychic for 3 months. I was already there. My position as a perceiver went into this altered state. And although I was shocked and surprised and unable to sustain it in a meaningful way, I got that experience. You got a taste of what the metaphysical, non-physical, whatever you want, just pick a name, call it a name.
Whatever
It's
label.
yeah, pick a name. You can make it your own. And but it is you that is experiencing this right now. You're just not aware of it. And that was a gift to me that I will never forget. So that's how I transitioned. My abilities now as a metaphysical being are highly developed. And I really didn't have to put that much effort into it. It turns out that I already had them.
Just wake up to it, become conscious.
Yes. And so that's how I transitioned. So here I am, a doctor standing inside a cult who probably would not understand a single thing I just said, transitioning from physician to healer. I'll never be able to leave physician behind, but I am transitioning to healer, which is a little different than a physician.
And when you've had these experiences and the healing, has anyone had a spiritual experience, an activation soul-wise?
Yeah, absolutely. What happens is that I didn't know what was happening at first, as I mentioned, but I started to warn my patients, you may have contact with people or entities. Entities sounds like, something out of Hollywood, but grandma may show up and you may get information. You may become, psychic, because what happens if they spend enough time in that position, they open what I consider the energy field expands. And that expansion is like getting a bigger radio dial on a radio or getting a bit better internet connection. There's more information available from the wider, giant, unbelievably large consciousness field. And there are people who want to talk to us. There's information that we have available to us. And for the longest time, I said, well, here's a person over here who's talking to dead people. And I said, they're making this up. And that's not true, because I started doing it. It was pretty hard for me to say, oh, you're faking this, when it's actually experiencing it. What do you do? At some point, you just have to say, okay, that's part of the human organism's consciousness ability. And all these legends and things that are there, they're outside of scientific measurement, sure. But if you're going to be a scientist, you make the observation. Now, if you're confronted with an observation, you have to, and it's reproducible. I mean, it's reproducible for you, Jamie. It's reproducible for me and for millions of human beings. So what are we going to ignore that observation because we have a worldview that says that cannot occur? That is not science. So the transition from being a scientist to a psychic is, I think, one that gives you some information. Most people that I know in this, they were practicing psychics, were psychics from the time they were children and knew it. And so they didn't go through this, I'm a scientist.
And none of them distractions.
Yeah. Like, oh, I had to go through, I feel really bad in some ways that I was hoisted on that petard of science, because I wasted a lot of time. Had I been psychic, had I been aware that I was continuously psychic from a child, I would have benefited from that. There would have been a lot of things. I wouldn't have felt the loss at the death of my patients or my loved ones. I would have recognized that they were just transitioning into a state that, they didn't have a physical body, and it would have been incredibly comforting. So I wouldn't have suffered that. I would have gotten information from the environment that was not accessible through the five senses or the scientific world. And that information is excruciatingly valuable. Now I have it. People ignore this, but there's a sense of joy and a sense of freedom that comes with that. And it has been the happiest time of my life. Before, I was afraid. Now I'm not afraid. It's very hard to scare me now. It's very hard to disrupt my being. You can try, and I think that's what people do when they try to control people. If you are a psychic, they don't like it because you're tough to control. You're tough to scare.
Well, not everyone's comfortable too. Like, hey, you reading me? What the? Like, hey, if you stop thinking thoughts, then I won't do it. Otherwise, it's there.
Yeah. I think it's wonderful to be able to, converse with other people who, have developed these skills, kind of developed, strengthened their muscles of psychicism or physical abilities. We have powers beyond what is available to us in the physical. It's time for us to stop fooling ourselves and listen to people who have not experienced these things and accept that whole idea as real without confirming the opposite. Are we psychic? Yes. Can we get there? Yes. I do it every day. And it's just how long you stay in that position of perceiver, the degree of psychicism that you experience.
And you can turn it on and off, and what level, what frequency you want to tap into.
Yeah, all you have to do is have a negative feeling or thought, and I'll tell you, you can turn the whole damn thing off, right? You can go back and forth. You don't have to float out into the universe and become a bother to your friends because they said you went nuts. You can go there and sample. It's kind of like turning on a radio. You get that information. You go to your computer every day and information comes in. That doesn't surprise you. That information comes from non-5 sense, non-brain sources shouldn't shock people anymore. This is what we are as conscious beings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I have to ask the question that all of our listeners have right now. How do we do this? How do we channel this energy? How does this work? Can you teach us how to do this? Because everyone wants to just be able to turn off the pain, turn off the anxiety, to heal, to feel better, and to tap into their psychic abilities. So how do we do this?
Well, I can demonstrate for your listeners. I would recommend that you not be driving a car because occasionally people, when they enter what I call the superconscious mind, have difficulty operating their physical machinery. So if you're, operating heavy equipment, you might want to either stop listening and play this again when you can do this, or pull over to the side of the road, go to a place where you're relaxed and comfortable, where you don't have to do anything in the physical plane necessarily. Because this experiment I've done now on 3 occasions. Years ago, I had a group of 18 people in a group, and I took them into this state by using my energy field. It turns out that we entrain or resonate with other people's energy fields in a big way. And that's what happened with that woman. She entrained to my field. I was in a deep state of consciousness. She said, "Oh, cool. No pain, no anxiety. I think I'll hang out here with him." And that's how she healed. She eventually healed so many things in her life. So bear with me as I explain. And what you are in right now, in a very high likelihood, is what is known as the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response is in the physical plane. And you can view what you're sitting in as 3 rooms enclosing each other and not separate from each other. Physical plane you can look at as a very tiny room inside a larger room, inside an enormous room. And the physical plane is very small. And the items in there you have access to with your 5 senses and brain. That field is fraught with threats to your physical survival. So you have inherited from your ancestors and animal ancestors something called the fight or flight response. If a predator shows up, you either kill it or run away. So you have an energy field surrounding you. What state would that energy field be best served by? if there was a predator approaching, it would be in the collapsed, tight state, very close to the body for detection and close-up fighting, and very small if you had to run away, so the predator would not be able to follow you with his sixth sense. Because if I can detect energy fields, you know that a tiger, after millions, billions of years of evolution, can detect your energy field. In fact, he is detecting an energy field with his eyes. He's detecting your physical energy field with some pretty good apparatus. And he's hiding his energy field with a striped fur, so you don't see him coming through the bush. Well, this is kind of interesting. So you got this fight or flight, collapsed energy field, stress response, fight or flight response, protector mode. Okay. Protector mode doesn't do you any good if you have no detector mode. So what you are entering in on a continuous basis is the second room, the superconscious mind, from the conscious ordinary mind, I call it. In that mind, your field is expanded, detecting the presence of any real predator. It's really, really hard to fool this mind, and the tiger knows this. So he tries to scare your butt. And this happens with human beings because your field will collapse. You can't detect his field anymore. If you were in the superconscious mind, you are in the relaxation response, because if there's no tiger within striking distance, what's the point of going to detector mode? There is none. So your field expands. I consider the field to be the third eye, the detector, just like I consider one of the five senses to be the regular old, pretty narrow range, blind, regular eyeball. And so, yeah, which, you can get yourself eaten if you use that eyeball and there's a tiger. I mean, that's a good way to get eaten. If you have the detector mode and you see this tiger coming from 200 yards away, you are really going to survive. As an evolutionary biologist, this is not a shocker that we have this. This is equipment for survival. In just a second, I'm in fight or flight. My field is contracted, and I've kept it that way. And I should say that it's spending most of its time in this contracted mode. It's actually protecting, detecting, protecting, detecting, protecting, protecting. It's going back and forth very fast. As I slow this down, I will spend more time in the detector mode, at which point my field will expand and stay there longer and longer and longer. At a certain point, you will feel this because you will entrain to my field, even at a distance. Jamie is a little different than your average Joe. His field is already spending most of its time in expansion because apparently he's had some training or something in this, or does this just because he's Jamie or whatever. And yeah, I think it may be just he's Jamie. You guys are married or something, right?
Yes, we certainly are.
Because their fields are connected. They're kind of experiencing the same thing. They're using each other's fields. We're herd animals, so we do this. If you're at the edge of the herd right now and you get eaten by a tiger, you'll understand why everybody just ran away at that point. So
I don't want to be that kind of an example.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if you've ever watched like herds of deer, all of a sudden the head will go up and everybody's gone.
Yeah.
That's because that field detected a threatening field, and because that animal survived because it knew how to run away, its detector mode picked it up, everyone in its protector, fight or flight mode, and they were out of there. They're gone, right? Okay, so the same thing happens with human beings. So you're detecting what's around you and your internal thoughts in room number one. Room number two, you go into the superconscious mind, you expand, you pick up all this extra information, you become, quote, psychic, because Bob right next to you goes, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see no tiger coming. I don't know what you're picking up, but I don't see it with my five senses. So he immediately potentially assumes that you're crazy or something akin to that, when really you're just using a sixth sense that he's not using. So you get this miscommunication. So in just a second, I'm going to go from fight or flight, protector mode, and spend more and more time in a gradation. And what you may feel is three things. You may feel a buzzy, warm, tingly sensation. The energy field is like a bellows, And when it opens, the chi comes in. Just like a balloon would expand, it would pull this chi in. This is what I call a type 1 healing. Because what happens is this chi is a nutrient. When you open your bellows in the superconscious mind away from the fight or flight response, people feel better and their organs get better. This shocked the daylights out of me when I first experienced it because I had no idea what was going on. This person just got better because I got them into the relaxation mode and their bellows opened up and all this chi flew in. And next thing you know, this organ was no longer dysfunctioning because chi goes where it isn't. And so that was a little bit of a shocker. You may experience a sense of profound peace or bliss. If so, this is your metaphysical body entering room number 2. And your emotional feelings at that point are being recorded. So that's kind of on the border between room number 2 or new room number 1 and room number 2, or it's fully in room number 2. So people get information about their environment and they say, there's no tiger here. I'm cool. And they start to look around and they go, hey, wait a second. This is paradise. I am in paradise. And so they get this bliss feeling. The third thing happens, and so that people get rid of their anxiety, which causes anxiety and stress causes the lion's share of disease, or tiger's share, no pun intended. And yeah, because the tiger gets most of it. So the deal is, room number 3, I call the universal mind because I also have to have a reference point. If you go into that mind when I go there, you will feel a sense that you do not have a body or your body is levitating. This is because on the universal level, you do not require a body to function. This is really cool. This is the one that took me the longest to figure out. If you deliver content, intent, a prayer, a command in this phase, then you get a magical kind of healing. And I don't know how to explain this, puppy, but some people are really, really good at it. And they go there, not realizing they're there, and deliver, I want this. This is what I desire. And when they do it, you don't have a lot of time to do it because you're going to be going back and forth between these rooms real quick. And it's hard to stay in the universal mind because it's so big. Your brain, your little pea brain goes, I don't know what that was, but I'm going to go back to room number 1 and try to figure it out. Good luck. Good luck. I wish you the best. If you can figure that out, please email this show and let me know, so I don't have to put up with that anymore.
Excellent.
So
we'll give you all the feedback.
Okay, so here we go. Right now, fight or flight. Contracted energy field, room number 1, 5 senses, regular old brain, ordinary mind. Okay, Jamie just went in, but he was already in. So Jamie's spending more time. Did you feel that, Jamie?
I'm always, yes.
Yep. Yeah, okay. And Maggie, Maggie, did you feel the transition there just a second ago, Maggie?
Okay. Yeah, I consciously went to the expansion.
Oh, so you did it without me helping you. That's cool. It doesn't matter. The thing is, if you have somebody who goes into that state around you, you will feel it. If it's long enough, you will perceive it with the ordinary mind. When you get back to home base, you'll go, hey, wait a second, I'm floaty and warm and I feel this sense of bliss. And your mind will record that, give you the information, and you can take it back to the old physical plane with you. Like, pictures of vacation that you have. Okay, so I'm in what I call Delta. And Delta is right before, I want you to appreciate the transition between that warm, fuzzy, tingly sensation. If you're feeling that, you're in room number 2. If you're feeling that bliss, you're definitely there and ready to go to room number 3, which I'm going to go to in just a second. Hopefully you'll feel the transition. If you're not already levitating and in that room, you'll feel this kind of sensation where you don't have a body anymore, or you don't need one. And it feels like this. There, somebody went in big time. or it was me. Anyway,
Which is the same thing.
Yeah. Or like I'm able to separate myself from people. I just feel this wave. And that's been very useful in telling people you're there. What I'm doing is I'm pointing to a place. You as a perceiver are going there. I'm not actually doing anything. However, you can borrow my field and go into it, if you will, which is not really, it's not mine. I don't own it. It's just I'm there. So you go, oh, there's a field right next to me. Cool, it's there, and you go into it. So there's no ownership here of any of these fields. I don't know what you guys are experiencing or what the audience is experiencing, but I think we should spend a little time here.
Yeah. And the expansion. Every time I unify, I entrain how it feels.
What I tell my patients is when they've got this information is to remember and record it. Because when you're in room number 1, if you remember what you have recorded in room number 2 and room number 3, reproduce it, your body will naturally re-enter that. Unless, of course, there's a tiger around, in which case you should get the hell out of there.
Smart.
But if you can reproduce it, you will re-enter this state. The challenge is remaining, because your curious, inquisitive minds want to know. Your regular brain is going to want to know what's going on, and it'll want an explanation. It will desire or crave one. I can tell you right now, I have an explanation, but it may not be correct. It's a template. It's a pointing. It's a map, if you will. Well, once you're there, you don't need the map anymore. I don't read the map once I made it to Cleveland. I'm in Cleveland or Cancun or wherever in this state. Once you're there, and you can do this in one step, there isn't any particular set of steps you need to take. All you need to do is recognize where you are, because you're already in this state. You just have to get yourself out of your ordinary mind, and you will go there every single time, instantaneously. So I don't know what you guys are experiencing, but that's how I get my stuff out of my little pea-brain ordinary mind. And it's turned out to be very useful for, my fellow travelers in this plane in room number 1, because all of a sudden you can go to a place where not only will you heal on a physical, emotional, and spiritual basis, but you will have access to information not available to the ordinary mind. You will become, quote, psychic, which is still a term I'm not sure I really like it. I'm having trouble with words these days because they don't do it. You tell somebody something. I tell somebody I'm an energy medicine practitioner, and I go, that's not going to work out, because I'm not sure that energy is involved in the sense that everybody thinks of electricity or light or something like that. I cannot determine whether that's true. And I'm a pretty good scientist. So if I can't figure it out, I think that other people say, well, you can use energy to get there. But is it really energy that we're manipulating? I think we're manipulating our own fields of consciousness, and it translates to energy on the physical level, and we can measure that, and that makes us comfortable. I think we're entering a greater field of consciousness every time we move in every moment. One of the real shockers is that there is no time or space as you go deeper into this, and things happen before you intend them to happen. This will really shake up your world, or they happen so instantaneously. I've done this now with a person that was in Australia, and I was in Colorado, and it was instantaneous and just as powerful. So regular electromagnetics do not do justice to that, because the electromagnetic pulse, if I was using that, would have fallen off, and there would have been a delay. There was neither. So when you enter this kind of thing, you may be entering something that has quantum characteristics or something along those lines. Or I think it may even be something that the physicists haven't quite pieced together yet. Because if you ask them, they will go, we don't know what consciousness is. That's a missing part of our equations. We've made all these nice equations, but somewhere in their consciousness fits, and they haven't found a, E equals MC squared of consciousness yet. Yeah. So those guys are really helping us out, but they haven't figured out what we're doing.
I love the word using of energy medicine only because energy doesn't die and neither does consciousness. So it does have an amazing fit because our life force energy, we get plugged in when we're incarnate. We have a physical body. We're almost plugged in consciously to our physical bodies. But when we leave, when we die, as we perceive it, when we graduate, we unplug, but we are still conscious beings, energy, and we carry all that forward as we move and as we grow and expand into different transformative states. And so the word energy, I think, is a very useful word. And I think it should be used because it is something we all understand in the physical world. And then if we relate it to consciousness, it's now in the metaphysical world. And it can go through both worlds.
And more.
Yeah. Well, I do want to mention a couple other things. As I mentioned, if you have a negative thought or feeling, you will go back to room number 1 reliably. So if you ever want to turn this off, it's like turning off a faucet, have a negative thought or feeling, or hang out with a negative person. So the other thing is that please remember that you are already there. You are sampling something that is continuously there, and you're just moving your position. I wouldn't even call it paranormal. I think this is normal operating procedure for human beings. We're just not aware of it. So a lot of us go, well, that was paranormal. And I'm going like, compared to what? So I'll tell you this amusing story. So I'm a doctor. I go, this is great. I can heal people with my energy field. How cool is that? All I have to do is expand my energy field and their organ systems will get better. So I decide I'm going to do this one morning. And so I'm walking down the hall in my clinic and there's a patient in the room and I go into this expanded state that I call beyond delta. I don't have any other word for it. I feel his energy field come through the wall as a wave, and I know he's in the same state. I walk into the room and I say, well, what brings you into the clinic today? And he goes, I don't know. And I go, well, you just told the nurse that, he had all these problems, all this pain, all this, we're depressed and all this. I said, well, I don't feel that right now. And so I went, uh-oh, I can't do this as a doctor because I'll lose my diagnostics. Because in room number 3, the guy is cool. He's golden in room number 3. So I immediately went back into room number 1, had a negative thought and feeling. And sure enough, the guy said, I got to deal with my, broken leg and my diabetes and all this stuff. He felt really bad. So that's a lesson to you. You are occupying a place where you are pain-free. When we enter the physical field, it's like going down a dark alley and you hear guns going off. And, and it's a rough place to be. But realize where you are. You are safe and intact in room number 3. You cannot leave room number 3. They can beat your body to a pulp and they can tear your mind apart with the things that happen on the physical. And it does feel like a victimization, but you're okay. When I leave people with that makes you brave. You go, you can take me out. Yeah, I get what you call the old person's superpower. I go, what are you going to do? Kill me? I'm like 800 years old, like you're going to take a year off. You're going to take a day off my life. Ooh. Go for it, big boy. You're such a rough.
But see, that's a big thing. People have a fear of what they don't understand. And if we can put the practicality of spirituality, do these scientific studies, get different perspectives of this, okay. Because kind of like you, once I experienced that, I have no fear of death. There is no death. I always say I never ever talk to the dead as we perceive it, right? You die in this dimension and then you go to the other side after this. And my thing is one, everything's spiritual. 2, life's relative because we as humans are extraterrestrials to everyone else. And aren't we right now living on the other side of where we come from before here? Doesn't that mean we must have died, or could it be just a shift in consciousness and patterns of energy?
Yeah. Are we ghosts to them?
What
do we look like to
energy,
them?
Man. Right.
Yeah, they're going like, I'm talking to some guy on the physical plane the other day, and boy, was he messed up. And, I'm trying to help the guy. If I were an angel, that's how I would feel. I would feel like, I'm doing my best.
Yeah, you'd be like,
Yeah, the guy's not listening. I'm talking to him all the time. He gets like 2 words of a sentence that I make, and he goes, I don't know, I had a dream or something. And, and next thing you know, you've got somebody who's getting partial information. And if I were on the other side, I think it would be very, very frustrating. And I think being involved in mediumship and communicating with the people who love you and who you love is one of the ultimate gifts of being in the metaphysical psychic realm. I mean, I miss people. And now that I've had a chance to speak with them, my life has changed.
well, and you bring up an interesting point to me that notice grandpa comes through as grandpa. They don't come through as one of the other lifetime vehicles that they had because people are like, who the frick are you? It becomes familiarity. People need a reference, in this case, soul prints of consciousness. Doesn't matter what vehicle you're in, but it's that vibe, that feeling, that energy. And I think the more that we can learn to discover ourselves in life, the more we find that life within us and bring it to the surface of consciousness and begin to live more than just survive and exist. And I think that you're making a tremendous contribution to people's awareness to go, be practical. One, I always say, please be skeptical about everything, question everything, just be open. Then they get that practicality to go, okay, you know what? That makes a little more sense. And I've never had that experience happen. Because an interesting aspect, which you're talking about, the energy, I always say that these abilities are so natural, they're supernatural.
And, like one of my favorite physicists, I don't know if you've read some of the quotes of Max Planck,
No.
Planck, read some of his quotes. He was a contemporary of Einstein who is considered the father of quantum physics. And he thinks the universe is a mind. It is a matrix
It's consciousness. Yep.
Yeah, and he says we can't get, as physicists, we can't get around that. We can't measure it. We can't, put it into an equation. It's there behind everything. It's what moves the universe. So we all have minds, and that is so beautiful a concept that we are part of something that is this large and this impressive. A lot of people think they're alone. You're not alone. You are part of something great and beautiful. Even if your life is a total disaster, you can turn from that and realize that there's a safe place for you that you will always return to. Another home, another soul, another place that is eternal and unassailable. No one can hurt you there. And that, when you realize that, it lifts that burden of pain, the existential pain that people feel. As people approach death, they look at that and they go, what's going to happen to me? You're going home. You're going to a place of tremendous peace where you will know everything and life will be good again. And I no longer fear death. I no longer mourn death. In some ways, I celebrate it. I mourn the loss of the physical beings around me, but I don't mourn what's happening to them. I know they will be safe now.
Well, and that's yeah. And with your knowledge, with putting things to the test and having it a little bit more practical when it comes out your mouth, it's like, okay, you know what? That makes some sense. And I've been questioning that stuff for quite some time. So it's kind of nice as you're sharing to go, you don't have to be anything different, just you. All the power's always been within. Just because you're not aware of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So, it's that conscious awareness that once we can connect with that, feel that energy. And for me, I'm lazy. I just always train everything. And to me, I always say it takes no more energy for me to send love and light to a person than to the all that is. Cover the bases, man. Everything, nothing, everywhere in between, and everywhere beyond.
Yeah. I say go for it.
Yeah.
I just say, you find this thing, just rock and roll. Go for it. Now, this is you. This is your inheritance. This is the gift that the universe or God or whatever you want to use the term gave to you. Enjoy the sweetness, revel, swim in the bliss. this is what we are here for. We are here to occupy the physical plane so we know what the metaphysical looks like. It's the only reason we're here, I think. I don't know, but I think that we have to have an anchor point and go, well, this is physical. So, that's the metaphysical. Okay, cool.
We always seem to have opposites as we perceive it. One to the other. How about it's all unified?
Well,
To
no,
me, right.
eventually we'll remove that illusion of separation and realize this is the divine matrix. This is the
Yes.
oneness. This is how we are all interconnected. And it's beautiful.
I think it should be part of like something that you're given when you're a little kid,
Mhm.
kind of like an owner's manual thing, and say like, okay, so you're I think around age 6 would be about right, because they're starting to teach you physicality, and next thing you know, you're in room number 1, and I know I was psychic as a kid, and because I talked to Jesus. Now, we didn't talk about the universe, we talked about my toy truck, and I continued that conversation into my teens until I went to college, and all of a sudden we stopped talking, and it wasn't him that stopped talking. It was me. I stopped listening, and I got nailed for a good 30 years. So, and I mean, it should be kind of one of those things. Here, kid, this is what you are. This is the equipment. You can go here, you can go there, whatever. And we would produce a generation that would have the advantages not only of the industrial age, the Renaissance, and the information age, but also of the age of consciousness. And those kids would kick some serious butt.
Yeah.
And that's what
And
they're doing.
Yes.
And that's what they're
They may be doing it. There's stuff going on behind my back. I have no idea what it is. I'm so busy, treating diabetes that, it becomes an ordinary thing. You don't have to re-enter like I did, after going through all these machinations. Science served me and medicine served me, but I had to go. I went out of my mind, became a trained moron, and I spent a lot of money. They gave me a piece of paper. Now, it doesn't
Sucker!
say moron. It doesn't say actually moron on there, but it might as well say moron, because and they should have given me another one that I could hang up on the wall saying trained moron. I spent $250,000,
You do it
and
beautifully.
total half a million or $1 million after interest, to become stupid again. And because I was very bright when I was a kid on the metaphysical level, I left that. What a mistake.
But
Everybody.
you can see you're sharing the fact that you control your abilities. Your abilities do not control you. People start tapping in. I see a lot of people waking up going, if that's all I'm going to see is the negative stuff, then I don't want to do this, and blah, blah, blah. And they turn it down. You never turn it off. You just turn the volume down. But it's been a huge thing that people are very reactive because they think or possibly feel that it controls them. And it's actually, they control it. You can suppress it if you want to. It's there. Everyone can do it. That's why I always say, Mag and I, we're a big proponent. Man, anything we do, everyone can do. We want to do the best we can to show you this is possible, to move out of the airy fairy to the practicality of spirituality.
Good.
Be able to hold this in your conscious awareness within this dimension as we perceive it of experience.
I also find it fascinating that, you had Jesus as one of your guides as a child, right? Really tight with Jesus. And he walked on this earth and did exactly what you're doing now. He held a conscious state for people to heal in his presence.
Well,
and now you're doing the same thing.
One of my experiments that I hope to have in the future is to get enough people to enter Beyond Delta simultaneously to see if everybody else does, because I don't have the juice to do it. The largest group I've worked with is 18, and I can take them into that state simultaneously, which is kind of cool. But that took a lot out of me. I was kind of exhausted following doing that. And I'm not exactly sure why that is, because I was using something that I didn't think was of myself. So I'm still trying to figure that out. But if you get enough people doing this,
power numbers.
Yeah, it's kind of like one of the things that happened with this woman, that I treated for fibromyalgia. So I get her out of pain and anxiety. Her husband was a total twit, a jerk, mean, abusive towards her, and all that. So when she went back to be with him, the pain and anxiety came back. And then she was smart enough to go, okay, he's pulling me into something I don't want. And she wanted so much to heal, she went back to where she was on that table. Bam, so did he. But it was for only a brief time because her field took his field into where she was. But he was such a jerk, excuse my French, I'm still mad at him, that he went back into Bammo land and he was using it as a weapon against her, which that's why I was so angry at him. I'm going, why are you doing this? Go. It's a number one, you should have been taught that you're not supposed to do this to vulnerable people. As a very young person, you're not supposed to hurt vulnerable people. If you want to go out go pick the biggest guy in the bar and walk up to him and try to scare him, you big
just neutralize
coward. Yeah. And that's I didn't ever said it to him because he would have beaten me. But he would have said,
shifting that energy, just like you're sharing.
Yeah. So, but anyway, but that's what happens. People get around, I call them big betas. They get around people who are angry, full of hate, full of fear, and their fields are bam. And they see that field as a tiger. And they're right. The proper thing is to get the hell out of there. Get as far away from that field as possible because they could physically harm you.
Know who you're dealing with.
Yep. Yeah. And so that's one of the things, there's kind of an energy protection. People should be also given a kind of an energy protection manual because we have some pretty nasty characters on this plane. And I went to my teacher one time and I said, what about if something evil decided to use these energy mechanics that you've been teaching me? And she said, well, that's not going to happen. She says, if you use this properly, you will be so big and powerful that they won't be able to topple you. She actually used the word topple, send you back into this. You will be big. There's a chance you will flip them into big and they won't even know what to hit them. And she said, the only thing that they can do, because they can't, because you have to be big to pull in enough energy to topple somebody. And you can't do that when you're angry. It's hard. So what happens, you said, the only thing it can do to you is scare you. And that's why I think these things that are out there floating around take on ugly appearances and aggressive appearances so they can scare people and pull them into a place where they are now in trouble.
Yep.
If they were, yeah. And, why would it even look like a demon? He'd look like a nice guy, he's doing it to scare you. And that's one of the things that I, carried forward with me. I don't have much trouble with that because I stay expanded. And it's kind of like the predators move on. They get a rabbit instead of a deer because the deer will, I'll get away. So they don't even bother. So if there are energetic predators and all these other things that people worry about, I've not experienced them. Yeah, because you stay big. You just go big on them.
Yeah.
You go big, boy. Yeah, what I call going Marine. I don't know if you know.
Beautiful.
I've had a lot of Marines in my practice, and I'm impressed. Uncle Sam says, take the beach, they take the beach. And it doesn't matter if they get shot up, they take that damn beach. And that is, and you can do that energetically. And I really do think you're unassailable at that point. That no energy can topple you. And when you go into the universal, good luck, because you're now confronted with something that is the entire Marine Corps on steroids. Yeah, saying good luck taking this particular beach because we've already occupied it. You good luck, trying to be mean to my creation. Good luck. So anyway, I don't know. I'm going on and on, but
that's cool, man. Yeah.
Well, we really want to thank you for taking the time to be on our podcast. Definitely. It's amazing. We've enjoyed this conversation thoroughly. I know our listeners are going to eat it up. So I also want to, I'm just saying this just so you know, we don't have to finish, but I just want to make sure I get this recorded, Dr. Bill.
Okay.
And also, you know, Dr. Bill doesn't currently have a website. So we're going to direct you to his YouTube channel and his Facebook page, and we will have links in the show notes so you can reach out to him. If you have experienced something transformative when you were listening to going into these different rooms, these different awakening areas that Dr. Bill so kindly walked us and talked us through, please send us an email, reach out to Dr. Bill, reach out to us. We'll have a link in the show notes to our emails. Please, we'd love to hear your feedback, because this is ongoing scientific experiment to see if it's pre-recorded, how it filters into the airwaves, how you can access this at any time energetically, whether it's live streaming, whether it's pre-recorded, at any moment, because time is an illusion. We all know this. So please, we'd love to hear your feedback. And thank you so much for tuning in today. Dr. Bill, thank you for joining us.
Can I say this final word?
Please.
Remain. Remain. You will heal if you remain. So get there and remain. Go to Cleveland, hang out for a while.
Funny, but that's where I come from, Ohio.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, Sandusky, Ohio.
I dreamt about Ohio last night.
Yeah, which is interesting. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Must be something in the water. A bunch of us from there use our abilities.